I never imagined that the happiest day of our family, one that was meant to be a celebration of love and new beginnings, would unravel into a war of lies and betrayal. My name is Michael, and for as long as I can remember, I have tried to live with integrity, even when my own sister, Elizabeth, made it her mission to tear me down. It all began at her wedding, a day that exceeded everyone's expectations. Elizabeth looked absolutely stunning in her couture gown, and her new husband, Brian, seemed to be the happiest man alive. Every detail, from the vows to the champagne toasts and the dancing, was perfect. Until later that night, when our family gathered at our parents' house to unwind and share stories of the big day. I remember we were all laughing and recounting the fun moments from the dance floor when suddenly Elizabeth stood up. Her voice shook as she announced in a tone that struck me like a truck. "John stole our honeymoon money. A cool $10,000 is gone." In that instant, the room fell silent. I could feel every gaze shift towards me as if I were the thief. My mind raced in disbelief. Stolen money? That accusation was absurd. Elizabeth continued on, her words tumbling out in a mix of sorrow and rage as she described how she had been crying all day, how she felt betrayed. Brian sat there, transfixed as though he'd been hit by a freight train, and our parents quickly joined in, their voices rising in anger. "John, how could you do this? Steal from your own sister?" "You're not welcome here anymore," my father roared. I tried desperately to explain that I had been at the front desk all night in full view of everyone, that I had not touched a single cent, but the accusations kept coming. The tension was unbearable. The entire room was filled with a thick mix of disbelief and hostility. Brian, to his credit, looked dubious and even said, "I don't think John would do something like that." Yet Elizabeth would not relent. She kept defending herself, her voice rising. "Stop defending him, Brian. I can't believe you take his side over mine." Then she turned her fury on me with a final searing blow. "You're disgusting. Get out of my sight." Her words echoed in the silent hall, and I could barely process the shock when our parents, in unison, declared that I was no longer a member of the family. My father's cold words, "You are no longer our son," cut deeper than any knife. Driving away that night, I was numb with a mix of anger and heartache, trying to piece together why Elizabeth had done this. As I started to put things together, I realized that it wasn't really about the money at all. It was about Grandma. A few months earlier, Grandma had made it very clear that she intended to leave the bulk of her fortune to me, trusting that I would preserve the family legacy. Elizabeth, the self-proclaimed golden child, was enraged by this decision. She had tried to persuade Grandma that she deserved the money instead, and when that plan failed, she set out to ruin my reputation in a desperate bid for control. I was angry, not just because I was falsely accused, but because our own family had turned against me. Yet I knew that if Elizabeth was going to play dirty, I could play even dirtier. I had been keeping a secret for months, a secret that would shatter her flawless little facade. Back in August, I unexpectedly caught her with someone other than Brian. I was at a coffee shop in the next town, meeting a friend, when I saw Elizabeth at a corner table holding hands with a man I didn't recognize. They were not subtle, kissing, laughing, and embracing as if the world around them didn't exist. At the time, I said nothing. It wasn't my business, I thought. But as the rumors grew and the accusations at her wedding spread, I realized that this was the proof I needed to expose her hypocrisy. I began to plot my retribution with cold determination. I knew her routine all too well. She always claimed she was visiting a friend or running errands when she went missing for a few hours each week. My best guess was that Thursdays around 7 p.m. were her usual window. One evening, I parked down the street from her house and waited. Sure enough, just before 7 o'clock, Elizabeth left in her car. I followed her at a safe distance until she arrived at the same coffee shop where I had seen her before. From across the street, I began recording on my phone. I captured every moment. As she hugged the man, as they kissed with a passion that made it clear Brian wasn't even in her thoughts. And finally, as they parted ways, I snapped photos of them embracing once more in the parking lot before they drove off in separate cars. My heart hammered, not from nerves, but from the anticipation of finally having undeniable evidence. I didn't rush to expose her. Instead, I waited for the appropriate moment, knowing that Elizabeth had gone nuclear on me at a subsequent family function by accusing me of stealing money. It was only fitting that I returned the favor. A few days later, I scheduled a dinner at our parents' house under the guise of apologizing and clearing the air. My parents, still seething over the false accusation, reluctantly agreed. Elizabeth accepted without hesitation, likely believing it was her chance to embarrass me further. The days leading up to that dinner were agonizing. Our family group chat was filled with messages praising Elizabeth for her supposed grace and condemning me as if I were the villain. Every notification felt like a stab. On the morning of the dinner, I sent a message to everyone in the family group chat, including Brian, saying that I wanted to meet for dinner to explain everything and apologize, especially to Brian. My mother immediately responded that they'd be there, but not without a warning that I should have a solid excuse for my actions. Elizabeth replied with a snide remark about how I should be ready to confess my guilt. Brian's response was a simple thumbs-up emoji. No words, just an unspoken acknowledgement of what was to come. I spent the entire day preparing for the dinner. I loaded the video evidence onto my laptop, meticulously checked its quality, and printed out screenshots as backup in case anyone accused me of fabricating the footage. When I arrived at our parents' house for supper, I felt as if I were entering a battlefield. The atmosphere was thick with tension. My parents barely greeted me, and Elizabeth sat at the head of the table with that smug, infuriating look on her face. Brian sat quietly next to her, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. I took a deep breath, stood, and addressed everyone. First of all, I want to apologize for how things turned out. I know you're angry, and I understand why. But there's something I need to say, something I've been holding back for too long. I paused, letting the silence build, and then continued. What you're about to see is not easy to watch, but it is the truth. I placed my laptop on the table and hit play. The video played. It showed Elizabeth walking up to a man in the coffee shop parking lot, the scene unfolding in crystal-clear detail. The way they hugged, kissed passionately, and the final shot of them embracing as they parted. The room was utterly silent. Then Brian, unable to contain himself, blurted out, "Who the hell is that?" His tone was harsh, laden with disbelief. Elizabeth's face turned a deep shade of red. She stammered, But I—" Yet no one let her finish. I continued coldly. "This isn't your friend, Elizabeth. How long has this been going on?" She tried to protest, but Brian stood up abruptly, his expression a mix of fury and heartbreak. "You've been cheating on me, while I was out working my ass off to give you the life you always wanted." My parents looked as if they had been hit by a truck. My mother's eyes welled up as she whispered, "Elizabeth, is this true?" Finally, with a trembling voice, she managed to say, "It's not what it looks like." But her words fell on deaf ears. I stood, my voice steady. This is a lesson for you, Elizabeth. You started this war, and I finished it." Brian grabbed his keys and, without another word, left the room. I, overwhelmed by a storm of emotions, vindication, humiliation, and heartache, grabbed my belongings and fled the house, not wanting to endure any more of the bitter confrontation. In the aftermath, the fallout was swift and brutal. My phone was inundated with messages, some calling me nasty and hateful, others apologizing for having sided with Elizabeth. I received a call from Brian 2 days later. His voice was calm, almost neutral, as he said, "Thank you for being honest. I wish it hadn't come to this, but I'm glad we talked." He mentioned that he had already begun making plans to move out, canceling his trip to the Maldives and stopping payments on the car he had promised to buy for Elizabeth. His words gave me a strange sense of closure, a recognition that at least someone in our family now saw the truth. A few days later, my mother sent me a long, guilty text message, begging for forgiveness for ruining Elizabeth's relationship, and insisting that family should always support each other. I stared at that message for a long time, and finally, I replied simply, "Family supports each other by telling the truth, not by covering up lies. Maybe you should think about that." My father responded shortly after, calling me immature and insisting that Elizabeth was still their little girl, regardless of what she had done. His words cut deep, and I knew that my parents were still blinded by favoritism. Elizabeth, however, was not done. A week later, she moved out, and soon I began receiving texts from mutual friends and extended family members who claimed that she was spreading a new tale, accusing me of setting her up to ruin her wedding and harm her relationship, alleging that I had followed her for weeks in a desperate attempt to catch her cheating. Some believed her story, especially those who did not know the full details, while others saw the truth in the video evidence I had gathered. I wasn't going to let her dominate the narrative any longer. Then, in a twist that pushed everything to a new level, Brian stepped in. He posted a lengthy letter on social media, detailing every aspect of the scandal: the adultery, the false accusations, the confrontation at the dinner, and even my role in exposing the truth. His post went viral among our close friends and relatives, and overnight, the majority of Elizabeth's supporters turned against her. But instead of admitting defeat, Elizabeth doubled down. She even filed a lawsuit for slander against me, claiming that I had maliciously taped and circulated private footage to ruin her reputation. I immediately hired my own lawyer, and in court, the evidence spoke for itself. The judge dismissed her lawsuit, chastising her for wasting the court's time with baseless accusations, and Elizabeth left the courtroom in tears, her world crumbling around her. In the days following the trial, my parents, our extended family, and even some of Elizabeth's closest friends shunned her. Brian ended all communication with her and moved out permanently, and my father later admitted, albeit quietly, that they had made a mistake by siding with her. I received a call from my father one night saying, "We made a mistake, Michael. I hope you can forgive us someday." I told him I would think about it, though forgiveness was a long, hard road after everything. As I drive away from that tumultuous chapter, I feel a strange mix of triumph and profound sadness. I have exposed the truth and cleared my name, yet the scars of betrayal will remain forever. I have learned that the price of deceit is steep, and that no matter how well one hides behind a flawless facade, the truth eventually emerges, leaving only ruin in its wake. Elizabeth, who once ruled our family as the golden child, now roams in disgrace, her reputation in tatters, her freedom stripped away by the very lies she spun. I do not regret exposing her. She began this war, and she has paid the ultimate price for her treachery. I now stand at a crossroads, determined to rebuild my life on a foundation of honesty and integrity, free from the toxic shadows of our past. I have learned that family loyalty should never come at the cost of truth, and that sometimes the hardest battles are fought within our own hearts. My journey has been long and painful, but I have emerged stronger, with a deeper understanding of who I am and what I deserve in life. As I stand here, free from the lies that once tried to crush me, I feel a quiet triumph mixed with the bittersweet pain of betrayal. I have reclaimed my truth and my dignity, emerging from the chaos of that fateful wedding night where my sister's false accusations and elaborate deceit were finally exposed by the undeniable evidence I gathered. Now, while I move forward with a heart that is healing and a spirit that is unbound, my sister Elizabeth is left to suffer the consequences of her own actions. Her once flawless facade shattered, her reputation in ruins, and her dreams crumbling beneath the weight of her own greed and manipulation. I have learned that no matter how carefully someone hides their misdeeds, truth will always find its way to the surface, bringing with it both justice and the painful realization that family loyalty should never come at the cost of honesty. In embracing this hard-won lesson, I choose to rebuild my life on a foundation of integrity, knowing that every scar is a testament to my strength and resilience. Now, I invite you to share your own experiences. Have you ever been betrayed by those you loved, only to find that exposing the truth set you free? How did you transform your pain into power? Let's start a conversation and build a community where our shared stories of struggle and redemption inspire us all to stand tall in the face of injustice. What does truth and healing mean to you? And how have you reclaimed your own dignity after a betrayal? Please share your thoughts and join me in this journey toward a brighter, more honest future.